Joining us now is Daniel Gade, veteran amputee. Daniel Gade running for U.S. Senate, Republican nominee against Mark Warner. That'll be decided on November 3rd. Daniel Gade, great to have you with us, man.
Thanks, John. I really appreciate being on.
All right, you had two pretty good debate performances, I thought. You know what was interesting? In both debates, Mark Warner, your opponent, Democrat incumbent, very reluctant to directly criticize Trump. Why do you think that is?
Well, I actually thought he came after Trump, after the president, really hard. But maybe he could have gone harder. But the truth is, I think you're right. As what you said is partially right, that he doesn't want to make the base of the, he thinks he can win some Republicans who he thinks are going to split the ticket voting for Trump and then him. And that's, of course, ridiculous because he was the leader of the Intelligence Committee, quote unquote, investigation into Trump collusion. So nobody who's a Trump voter should believe that Mark Warner has their interest in mind.
Well, I don't think so either. In those two debates, what was the biggest thing that you learned, Daniel?
Well, I learned that Mark Warner is just a career politician. I mean, I knew that by his record, but then when you get up there on the stage and you see him repeating talking points instead of actually answering the question, when you see him repeating platitudes instead of actually engaging with the topic at hand, it's like, oh, that's what a career politician looks like up close. And so I thought both of my debate performances were absolutely victorious. My staff and professionals around me were thrilled. And so the good news here is that I've drawn a sharp contrast between the career politician Mark Warner and me as the career servant, and I think that's been my biggest takeaway.
Tell me about what you think in this campaign, Mark Warner's biggest weaknesses, Daniel.
Well, his biggest weakness is that he has voted with his party virtually in lockstep his entire career, and he's never taken any hard positions. So his strategy, his entire political career, has been to be sort of the gray man, the man that nobody notices, the one who only pops up every 6 years for a campaign. And he doesn't lead on legislation. He doesn't take any controversial or hard stances. He doesn't ever go up against his party. And the reason he did that for the longest time was because he thought Virginia was basically a purple or even a red state, and he was trying to keep his seat. Now that he thinks it's a permanently blue seat, he just is trying to keep his seat by voting with his party all the time. And the people of Virginia are smart enough to see through that facade, and they know that he is simply a career politician. I think that's the main weakness. People look at Richmond and they look at D.C. and they say, I'm sick of that. That's a mess. And then they look at the people who are there and they say, oh, that's why it's a mess. Maybe we should pick new people.
Here on the John Fredericks Radio Network, we're with Daniel Gade, Republican nominee for U.S. Senate in Virginia. Daniel, when you look at this race right now, a lot of people have written you off. What do you have to do to win?
Well, we have to keep doing what we're doing right now, which is we have to unite the base and reach out to independents and some soft Democrats. In a month ago, the polls were me down 22. A week ago, they were me down 9, and we're going to run another poll here in a couple days that I think is going to show really great progress. So what I've been doing is introducing myself to the voters by radio and TV, and we're going to keep doing that. And we're seeing that independents, I know most of the folks who are listening to this right now are probably pretty solid conservatives, but the truth is that independents, when they discover that there's a chance to vote for a career servant rather than a career politician, independents are coming over 2-1, John. And so the challenge is to introduce myself to those independents. And even in Northern Virginia, our internal polling shows Mark at like 52 and me at like 40. So that is great news because if I get 40% of Northern Virginia, I win the race.
Well, look, the recent polling that we have, and you've got the same, shows you down 9. We've got us down 3, about between 3 and 3.5. So you're running 6 behind Trump right now. But I attribute that to just name ID, right? A lot of people don't know you. That's why you've got under 30 days to get out there, Daniel, and do it. Let's talk about the Senate hearings with Amy Coney Barrett. The Mark Warner has been very critical of the Senate moving forward and McConnell moving forward with her nomination, both the hearings and then the vote before November 3rd. Do you think the Republicans are doing the right thing, or would you rather wait until we decide who's going to be the next president?
Well, I don't, here's what I've said consistently is that the Constitution gives the President of the United States the authority to appoint judges and other executive officials, and gives the Senate the responsibility to either confirm or refuse to confirm those nominees. And in 2016, the Republican Senate erred in not giving Merrick Garland a vote. They should have brought him to the floor, voted on him, defeated him, and told Obama to try again. You know, and in 2016, Mark agreed with me because he said #do your job. And in 2020, we'll call that Mark flip Mark. And in 2020, flop Mark says, "Oh no, we need to wait until after the election," as if a president's authority only is 3.8 years or 3.7 years rather than 4 years of a term. So the president still has the authority to appoint somebody. I'm glad he appointed Amy Coney Barrett. I think a lot of her, and the Senate has the responsibility to give her an up or down vote. And I certainly hope they'll vote yes. And if they don't, then I'll vote yes in January when she comes to the floor, because she is a distinguished jurist who believes that the Constitution is a contract, as I do.
We're with Daniel Gade. As far as your positions and policies, I know there's one issue that you don't see eye to eye with the Trump administration on, and that's Hb1 visas. I kind of get your position on it. I don't agree with it, but I certainly respect where you're at. Are there other positions that you don't share the same view as Trump does?
Yeah. So on the H-1B thing, our education system in America is a mess, and we're not sending out enough. We're not graduating enough high-tech qualified people to fill all the demand for high-tech jobs, particularly in Northern Virginia. So I'm okay with H-1B visas. I think we ought to be bringing the best people from around the world to pull the American plow and work in our industry. And that's an area in which I mildly disagree with the administration. But that's fine. Virginia's electing me to be a voice for Virginia and a student and a scholar of the Constitution. And so that's what I'm going to do. Another area that I have expressed some dismay with the administration is in the first 3 years of the administration, but pre-COVID, the budgets were, $1 trillion deficits year over year, and I think that's a mistake. I think that what we ought to be doing is having fiscal discipline and moving towards a balanced budget as rapidly as possible, and that's an area that the administration, I think, in an effort to rebuild America as rapidly as possible, they were doing some deficit spending, which I think was excessive. But that's a process concern, not I'd say not like who the president is. Just how do we get to our shared goal of keeping America the best country in the world?
Are you in favor, if you were in the U.S. Senate now, would you be in favor of another CARES extension stimulus package in view of the deficit that you just talked about?
Yeah, as long as it's a skinny one. We are still in an emergency. Our economy is still, limping along, and I think we need a round two of the Paycheck Protection Plan, some additional investment in search for a vaccine, and as well as some additional money to get school back to work. And the Republican bill that was put forward a month and a half ago was a good bill, and it should have been passed, and it was a skinny one. But the Democrats wanted a big fat one that bails out state and local governments and things like that. And remember, Mark Warner voted against COVID relief for Virginia families. And so people who are out there are independents, Democrats, Republicans. If they understand that he voted against COVID relief for their families, they ought to be angered by that.
Now, what about, Daniel? What about let's move to COVID here. These lockdowns. As a U.S. Senator, are you in favor of continuing to lock down areas where there's spikes in cases, or do you take the other approach, which is these things are going to cycle through? There's got to be herd immunity. 99.7% of the cases end up without anything happening. What is your position on COVID-19 going forward?
Yeah, my position, thanks, that's a great question. My position is that we need to protect people who are vulnerable, of course, with, masks and all that. That makes sense. But what we ought not to do is cripple our economy the way that we did in March, April, and May. To shut down businesses means those businesses go away forever, and that has its own death toll as well with respect to suicide and car wrecks and alcoholism and all of that stuff that happen when an economy is shut down. So pretending as though the virus is the only problem is a mistake, and going in the direction of shutting down the economy does permanent damage to real American people, just as getting sick does. So it's kind of a balancing act, and we need to get our economy back up on its feet, and we need to get it going, and we need to be smart about how we interact in public until the worst of this is over, and until we achieve some kind of herd immunity, or until there's a vaccine that is useful.
If you're in the U.S. Senate, Daniel, Trump gets reelected, because I think that's probably a likely scenario that he gets reelected. But if he does or doesn't, what would you do to hold China accountable for this virus and for some of the other things that they've done? And are you in favor of continuing the tariffs?
Well, the good news about there's not much good news about COVID, right? But one good news piece about COVID is that it's finally exposed once and for all the dangers of pretending as though a Chinese communist government is a good actor, because they're clearly not. And so there's a couple things we have to do. We have to protect our supply chain of PPE and of pharmaceuticals. That was exposed early in COVID. We need to continue to understand that China is not a peer. They are a competitor, and they have their own global ambitions. And so we are in a low-grade, thankfully non-shooting war with the Chinese. I mean, let's be totally clear about that. So in general, I'm actually pretty much a free trader. But with respect to China right now, I'm in favor of continuing the economic pressure that the Trump administration has put on them. And I think it's been pretty well guided. We're still selling a whole lot of our important farm exports to the Chinese at the same time as we're holding them accountable on steel and some things that pinch them a little. And I think we ought to continue that aggressive trade policy.
You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network, Trucking the Truth Across America. We're with Daniel Gade, veteran amputee, running for U.S. Senate, Republican nominee against Mark Warner. Warner going for a third term. This will be decided on November 3rd. So let's get back to Daniel Gade here. Let's get to foreign policy. The war in Yemen, we talked about stopping our backing of the UAE and the Saudis and refueling their planes on missions. If you're in the Senate, are you in favor of us just getting out of there, or continuing what we're doing with the Saudis and the Emiratis?
Yeah, I'm not thrilled, and this goes back decades, actually. I'm not thrilled with what we've done in America, which is a transfer of the war-making power to the executive rather than to the legislative. And this is not a Trump problem. This is not a critique of President Trump. This is, in fact, a critique of Trump and Obama and Bush and Clinton and Bush and Reagan and on and on and on and on. And the reason that the Constitution puts the war-making authority in the Congress in Article 1, Section 8 is because the decision to go to war, if we're going to be involved in war, the decision to go to war should occur at kitchen tables around America. That conversation should, and be transmitted through our congressional representation, not in the unitary person of the executive. So I think that the administration should send a package to the Congress to vote on, and then that determines our foreign policy towards Yemen and those areas. But as a general matter, interfering in other countries' wars, even for humanitarian reasons, always has unknown and further negative effects, and we ought to be very, very reluctant to do that.
President has systematically continued to withdraw our troop base out of Afghanistan. A lot of people concerned about that. He did campaign on it. If you were in the U.S. Senate, is that something that you would favor, a constant drawdown, or do you think the troops there we have right now is about right?
Well, again, going back to what I just said, either we should declare a war and then win the dumb thing, or we should stop pretending as though nation building around the world is appropriate. And we long ago accomplished our mission in Afghanistan, which was never to make Afghanistan into into France, right?
Right.
Our mission in Afghanistan was to prevent further attacks like 9/11, and we've done that. It's now time to get our troops out of there and bring those folks home, or redefine the terms, declare war, and then just beat the absolute snot out of whoever stands in our way. But in the meantime, I support the president's general approach to being very constrained about our foreign entanglements.
Let's get to Mark Warner. I think it must have been 50 to 75 times, Sunday after Sunday after Sunday, I saw Mark Warner, who I try to give the benefit of the doubt to, as you know, in the past. I saw him get on TV on Sunday or during the week in Congress and keep telling me about the Russian collusion hoax, that where there's smoke, there's fire. I think that was his favorite term. And there were more questions than answers. And he had more information than Richard Burr had, who was at the time, he was the Senate, he was head of Senate Intel. And then when Burr closed the thing down, he said, no, I've got more information. This went on and on and on. Then he met and tried to meet with Steele in a secret meeting in the United Kingdom. So when the senator kept saying he had something that no one else had, and where there was smoke, there's fire, did he ever have anything? What was that about?
No, and if you look at if you've read these reports, thousands and thousands of pages of reports, what you discover is that they dug and dug and dug and dug, and never found anything that was criminal, never found anything that was illegal in any way, and that's my main concern here is, look, what could that time have been better spent doing? He spent all that time and effort where he should have been fighting for Virginia, instead trying to basically undo the results of the 2016 election by hoping that he'd find some smoking gun, and he never did. And it's like, okay, your single-minded hatred, and I have a theory here, actually, John. I don't know how you feel about this theory, but my theory is that Mark Warner has always wanted to be president himself. And so
yes.
he's just mad that Donald Trump is president, and so he's trying to be basically his chief persecutor, because he knows that he himself is never going to be president, and he feels like somehow his career has been a failure.
Well, that might be. I mean, I have to tell you that I took Mark Warner seriously for a long time. I thought he was more level-headed. I remember when he was, with the Gang of Eight with my friend Saxby Chambliss trying to get a budget deal. I mean, I thought he was a pretty level-headed guy, business guy. So I took him seriously. And to be honest, he got on TV every Sunday and he said, where there's smoke, there's fire. I've got information I can't share, but it's very bad. We're going to keep looking into it. Every time a revelation would come out, he'd say, I've got more questions than answers. So I'm thinking, well, maybe there's something there. Well, he never had anything. So I felt like for those months, I got, I'm not going to say lied to, misled. And so it kind of soured me on the whole thing. And now I just don't believe him, because he never had anything, and he kept inferring that he had, and either what he had he didn't understand, or whatever it is, it was bad because he didn't have anything, and he kept saying that he had something. So I just can't go forward with the guy on that. It's tough for me now to believe anything he says, and I hate to say that because, I try to take everybody on face value. And I found that very disappointing. And I think the most damaging thing is when Richard Burr and Warner were very professional. I mean, they talked to each other. They tried to be bipartisan. And when Burr said, I'm shutting this investigation down, I'm the chairman, I'm shutting it down because there simply is no evidence, there's no facts, Warner wouldn't go with him on it. He said, well, I've got facts. Well, what do you have that Richard Burr doesn't have? It turned out he didn't have anything. And so it became very partisan. I'm out of time, but I've got a couple of questions here from our listeners via text. I'm going to ask you one of them. I'm going to ask you two of them. Hustle in Providence Ford says, could you ask Daniel where he would draw the line on spending where the general welfare clause is being used to justify it?
Yeah, the general welfare clause is in political science, it's called the sweeping clause. And the idea there is that Congress has granted itself these sweeping powers under the general welfare clause to do a whole lot of things that the founders never intended. And so if you look at, you could look at programs like federal intervention in education. You could look at federal control of healthcare spending. All of those are justified under the general welfare clause. But we can't pretend as though we can start with a clean sheet here, because we can't. We have to start from where we are. So what we have to do is start being wise about which programs we continue. And one of the things I really like is that will get us back on track is what are called single issue bills, where instead of these monster overspending bills that have to get voted on, yes, we get bills where individual programs have to live and die on their own. And that's when we can look at the general welfare clause and say, is this justified under the Constitution?
All right, final question. This comes from Den in Chesapeake. He says, ask Daniel Gade if he thinks that Americans have been misled about the COVID pandemic danger. He said he missed his opportunity to call out Warner on this during the recent debate. Den, how do you respond to that?
Yeah, I think that obviously COVID is a very serious disease. If you get sick from it at the maximum level, there's a couple different levels. If you get sick from it in the very sick category, you could die, and 210,000 Americans have died of it. So it's a very serious disease, most especially for people who are already sick from other things or who are elderly. And I think the media, I don't know about the government misleading us. I know the media has misled us by trying to make everything into a frothy, scary story so that people are panicked, because that puts eyeballs on web pages, which drives advertising dollars. And I think the media loves panic. I mean, the summer of the sharks and all this stuff. That's all. That's been something that they're working very hard on, keeping the panic going. And what we need to do is we need to reopen our economy. We need to be wise about protecting people who are vulnerable. We need to get back to work. We need to understand that COVID's going to be with us for a while and protect those who are vulnerable and go about our lives as soon as possible. And the president's been pretty good on this. Mark is trying to beat me up on saying, oh, the president did a great job. Well, even Fauci in March said the president's work here, I think the term he used was incredible or remarkable. So the president's been working hard on this. Our government has been working hard on it. I would say it's more of the panic has been media-driven, not government-driven.
John Fredericks Radio Network. I want to thank Daniel Gade for being with us. Hey, Daniel, big shout-out to your wife, Wendy. I've been had the honor of introducing her 2 times at 2 rallies. She's absolutely fantastic. And your number one most enthusiastic surrogate you've got. She's fabulous. So tell her I said hi, and thanks for all she does.
She's great.
Daniel, thanks.
She's great. I'll do it, John.
She is. Hey, what's your website?
Yeah, good. I was going to do that. Gade, GADEFOR, Virginia.com. And if you want to help me out and throw $20 in there, that's great. That's the donate link. And then on Facebook, @GADEFOR, Virginia. But I'd love to interact with everybody. So keep an eye out for our future events and vote for me November 3rd or before. Thanks, everybody.
All right, Dan Gade, thanks for being with us.